Good morning, good afternoon, depending where you are. My name is David Okon, and thank you for your support. Thank you for subscribing to my channel, and thank you for being part of this program. I'm talking about Brexit. Brexit means Britain left the European Union. The European Union is a collection of member states in Europe to form a country known as the European Union. And the European Union is actually a function of globalization, which features similarly within Africa, East Africa, and the Middle East, and every part of the world, USA, and globalization is globalization, involving all the continents of the world coming together as one country. So in future, with globalization, you're going to get all the countries coming together, whether you are developed, you are developing countries, whether you are poor or rich, all the countries will come together. There will be no border controls like it is now. The Mexican will freely travel into America as much as they like. But this is in the future. For now, if you have money, in practice, you're allowed to travel more easily. But because capitalism is rigged in favor of the rich, and if you want to experience more freedom, try and have some money. If you don't have money, it's likely that you're going to suffer. And I'm looking at Brexit. I think it's important that people should learn about Brexit because it relates to the cost of living. I'm talking about the cost of living because this is a crisis now. And it's the best way to deal with problems like that is actually to learn about it and you take responsibility. Now, if you look at the government, especially here in Britain where I live, and also across the globe, there is an emphasis on responsibility as opposed to rights. Yeah, when government intervene in a capitalistic economy, it is actually trying to help people who cannot help themselves. This is actually providing more rights to people who are not multimillionaires, But when you hear the government actually focusing on responsibility as opposed to rights, know that it is saying to you they are no longer interested in helping you, which is now a problem in Britain with the current Conservative Party, with the current Conservative government, because the current Conservative government is what it's doing is actually it's a right wing, extremist right wing, extremist right wing extremism means um, supporting an extreme version of capitalism, which focuses on the market more than on the people of a country. Right now, we in Britain and around the globe, we elect our governments, but our governments in many ways are now failing to run the country because they have handed all the powers to the market. The market rules, which means the rich of the world rules, because the rich are the ones who have interest, financial and probably political interest in the market system. If you are not rich, you are a consumer in the market space in the marketplace, and investors in the marketplace are actually the super rich, the multimillionaires and multi-billionaires. And it is in their interest for the government to support market system more than the public system. Public system has to do with the government intervening to help people who cannot help themselves, the poor. The government intervening to help the poor, and these provide rights for people who would otherwise not have right in a country, because you cannot have right if you cannot access food, energy, transport, health, and employment, as well as housing and similar social infrastructure. And these, because the government's attitude, especially in Britain, in the West, and also across the globe now, is to lean towards the marketized version of capitalism. So we have a problem known as the cost of living as a crisis. It's real. It's something I've chosen to speak about in this program, and I will continue to speak about it stay bear with me over the weeks, months, and hopefully years. We're going to talk about whatever subject I choose to talk about. I will link it with the cost of living because it's so important that people may, if the government continues not to intervene to support people who need help, some people will continue to die. A lot of people are now committing suicide, especially young people. Actually, in the UK, the families are actually breaking down. UK has the second, the second highest rate of divorce in the world, only after the United States of America. And this is actually associated with capitalism when families are under a lot of pressure, especially families who are actually poor. But you see, the idea, the threat within the family is associated with the way our culture operates. But because when you are actually a poor person, other factors, you experience other negatives in society more than people who have money. People who have money have more resources to rely on. So now, in effect, we are seeing a lot of crises within the family in the UK and in Europe and also across the world. We are seeing more, the number one killer of young people, of youth, is actually suicide due to mental health. Mental health is when people worry about their livelihoods and when people actually suffer, in different ways. You can't go to the hospital because there's no money. The government is not financing the health service. And you can't find work because the government is not supporting small and medium businesses to create jobs. You cannot get any other support to help you, on your income need requirements because the government is making cuts within the public sector. You cannot support the public sector if you don't finance it. It doesn't matter whether it is run privately or publicly. That's why I've been talking about the cost of living over and over and over because it's so, so, so important. And I've been encouraging people to be an expert on certain topics like Brexit. And Brexit, like I said, when Britain left Europe, if you're an ordinary person in the UK, if you're actually an ordinary citizen, take an opportunity, read about, you only need about 30 minutes a day to read about the European Union, learn about the terminology, learn about all the things they say, like, some of these terminologies were created during Brexit, and there were terminologies already existing before the crisis of Brexit. And any terminology, whether on benefit, housing, employment, legal terminologies, sociological terminology. Be a student in a modern world where the government say be responsible for your life. We, the government, are no longer going to be responsible for your life. Take responsibility. Learn and learn and learn and work and work and work. Save and save and save. Get out of poverty. Do your best to become rich in order to survive. That's the best way to go. That's why I'm doing this video. Watch this video, subscribe to my channel to support it. I need your help. And leave a comment, let me know what you're thinking. I've been talking about different topics, but I've talked about one topic, the cost of living. And following the referendum of the 23rd June 2016, many new pieces of Brexit-related jargon entered the popular youth. Like I was saying, some of these jargons, you need to learn them to support how you learn about Brexit. The word Brexit is one of those jargons because it was a new jargon is actually a word created to illustrate a phenomenon of Britain leaving Europe. Is called Brexit, and it was voted word of the year by a year in 2016 by the Collins English Dictionary. If you like to study English, you can study English Dictionary, and so it was voted the word of the year. So that's how dramatic Brexit was, because the word Brexit was voted the word of the year in 2016. It was really, really cool, and by Collins English Dictionary. There are other background information you may need to look at, like the United Kingdom and the EU membership. You need to look at these things, and look at things like accession of the United Kingdom to the European community and the United Kingdom membership of the European Union. How Britain got into Europe and when they did this. So you have to look at the inner six, blue, and the outer seven, green, of the European integration from 1961 until 1973. These are actually some of the features of European Union. When you are looking at Brexit, you also look at these elements. And the EC members, you talk of inner six. These are members, founder members, and then the EFTA members, outer seven. All these features actually these are some of the concepts and understanding people need to learn when the UK first joined the European communities, along with Denmark and Ireland. On the 1st of January 1973, it was one of the 9 member states that made up the bloc at that time. So you have the European members, European community members. This is the history of the European Union. It started with something called the EC, European Union, European Community membership. The inner six European countries signed the Treaty of Paris in 1951, establishing the European Coal and Steel Community, ECSC. This is one of the early institutions of the European Union. If you look at my study of the European Union, you will discover that these institutions carry a lot of power. So there is the first in 1951, the Treaty of Paris. These are legal instrumentations. The Treaty of Paris, and containing the inner six member states who actually signed the first treaty, one of the earliest treaties, the Treaty of Paris. Paris is in France. If you didn't know, this was in 1951. This treaty established the European Coal and Steel Community. Coal is what you know, what is energy, and steel is actually a mineral, which actually the primary, the fundamental materials at that time for industrialization. So you find that the EC European Community was an economic project from the start, and these were actually created around these leading minerals and energy and material minerals like the European, like coal and steel, within the European hemisphere and control. So the 1955 Messina Conference deemed that the ECSC was a success and resolved to extend the concept further, thereby leading to the 1956 Treaties of Rome, establishing the European Economic Community (EEC) and the European Atom Energy Community (Euratom). So if you look at Euratom, you'll talk about atomic energy, which you might be familiar with. Yeah, atomic energy is actually to do with energy, and I think you could say at a nuclear level, and also and the institution of the EEC and an institution, and also of the European Atomic Energy Community. These are actually countries and resources. countries of Europe and resources, and there were institutions organized to focus energy and resources on those resources. So this actually happened in the early years. So in 1967, this became known as the European Communities, the EC. So the UK attempted to join in 1963 and 1967, but these applications were vetoed by the president of France, Charles de Gaulle, who feared the UK would be a Trojan horse for US influence. So there was tension between different powers, suspicion, because they wanted to come together, but some of them didn't want to give up most of their powers. Basically, the early European powers, some of them wanted to have their cakes and eat it. At the same time as trying to create a union of Europe, member states, including Britain and maybe France, and others were suspicious of one another. Membership of the then EEC was thoroughly discussed at the long debate in the House of Commons in October 1971. It led to the decisive vote in favor of membership by 356 to 244. As historian Piers Ludlow observed, the 1971 parliamentary debate was of high quality and considered all issues. The British were not misled and persuaded to accept membership in a narrow commercial entity without being aware that the EEC was a political project liable to develop in the future. The Conservative Prime Minister Edward Heath signed the Treaty of Accession in 1972. And Parliament passed the European Communities Act later that year, and the UK joined Denmark and the Republic of Ireland in becoming a member on the 1st January 1973 without a referendum. So, like I said before, changes within a country's member state involving the European Union, or what was then the EC, whether it was about joining or otherwise, did not necessarily require a referendum, which actually served to illustrate why the Conservatives made a major political blunder in 2016 when they decided to give a referendum to the British people without actually explaining to them clearly what the implications were, and misleading the British people into voting to leave Europe. During the 1970s and the 1980s, the Labour Party was the more Eurosceptic of the two major parties, and the Conservatives the more Europhile. So things have changed for one reason or another, because between the 1970s and the 1980s, like I said to you, European Union as a topic, as a phenomenon, as a concept, is extremely expensive. I mean, it's extremely complicated to everyone. And even the Labour Party in the 70s and the 80s were suspicious of the European Union. They were the Eurosceptic more than the Conservative Party, who were considered at that time to be more of Europhile, until perhaps we elected then Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. So at that time, Labour won the February 1974 general election without a majority, and then contested the subsequent October 1974 general election with a commitment to renegotiate Britain's terms of membership of the European Union, European Community, believing them to be unfavorable, and then hold a referendum on whether to remain in the EC on the new terms. In practice, the EC now, the European Union, is a right-wing agenda, which actually must have necessitated the Labour Party of the time, which were more leaning toward the left, which were more socialistic other than capitalistic, uh, in terms of the political spectrum alignment, where they stand in terms of their views, in terms of the issues they care about. Labour again won the election this time with a small majority, and in 1975, the UK held its first ever national referendum asking whether the UK should remain in the ECA. This was in 1975 by the Labour government, despite significant division within the ruling Labour Party. All major political parties and the mainstream press supported continuing of the EC. So at that time, I think the Labour Party was lucky because the political and the country units voted in favor of the EC at that time. On June 5th, June 1975, 67.2% of the electorate in whole but two British counties and regions voted to stay in support for the UK to leave the EC. In 1975 appears unrelated to the support for leave in the 2016 referendum. But all in all, the country support in 1975 they voted to remain in the European community. In 1979, the UK secured its first opt-out. Although the expression was not contemporary, it was the only EEC country not to take part in the European monetary system. So the European monetary system is to do with currency, including the pound, the euro, and all the other member state currency. And a lot of the country member states in the European Union gave up their national currency in favor of the euro. The euro is the European Union currency. Britain actually opted out. It means it remained with the pound up to this day. It refused to give up on its pound. It refused to adopt the euro, the European Union currency, the euro. And to this day, Britain still uses its own sovereign currency, the British pound. After their heavy defeat in that election, Labour changed its policy. In 1985, the second Margaret Thatcher government ratified the Single European Act, the first major revision to the Treaty of Rome without a referendum. Like I said before, most governments don't give referendum because referendum is a very risky political approach. So Margaret Thatcher in 1985 uses its majority in Parliament, allowing the British Parliament, which is actually a sovereign institution, to take decision on behalf of Britain. Like I said, that is actually consistent with representative democracy, where the British people elect MPs and Parliament to act on their own behalf. And every time government decide to give a referendum, it's actually a choice which, in my opinion, is risky and very bad. Often it ends up in disaster, especially if the government loses, especially when the government is campaigning one way or the other, and whatever happens, I mean, it can be chaotic, especially with reference to central issues like the European Union at that time, the European community. So we talk about the Treaty of Rome, which is responsible for the Single European Act. Single European Act, I don't really know the detail, but I think it has to do with Britain coming together. And I would think it actually culminated in what now is called the European Union is the deepening of the ties, the European countries coming together. I may need to do a review to know specifically what it stood for. Comparison of results of 1975 and of 2016, when in 1975 Britain voted to remain, and in 2016 referendum, Britain voted to leave. In October 1990, under pressure from senior ministers and despite Thatcher's deep reservations, the UK joined the European Exchange Rate Mechanism, ERM, with the pound sterling pegged to the Deutschmark. Deutschmark is the currency of Germany. Thatcher resigned as Prime Minister the following month amid Conservative Party divisions arising partly from increasingly Eurosceptic views. Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, the first female Prime Minister of Britain of the Conservative, was a Eurosceptic. Eurosceptic, like I said previously, are the ones who do not like the European Union. She was an extreme right wing, and she ruled Britain the longest and destroyed anything. Margaret Thatcher was fundamental in changing capitalism in Britain. He destroyed the public sector permanently. Every other government entering Britain now have to struggle to manage the public sector because Margaret Thatcher, Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, destroyed the public sector totally. He destroyed it in Britain. He destroyed it in Europe. Britain destroyed public sector across the globe. The UK was forced to withdraw from the ERM on Black Wednesday in September 1992 after the pound sterling came under pressure from currency speculations. Currency speculation is gambling with money. It is part of the stock market, so it was a crisis in 1992 involving money. The pound sterling lost its value. It actually was named Black Wednesday. I don't know why every time there is a major catastrophe involving major crisis, it's called black. This has nothing to do with black people. In case you're wondering, it has nothing to do with white people either. It's just Black Death, Black Friday, Black Wednesday. So this is not black people. They don't talk about black people at all. So don't think black people are dangerous, because most of the European countries, the white countries, are calling these calamities Black Death, which was actually a pandemic. It was actually a global epidemic or pandemic, whatever. It killed so many people. Italy left the same month, but would soon rejoin on a different ban. So there was a major crisis in Europe. The UK did not seek re-entry and remain outside the ERM. ERM actually to do with the currency of the European Union, the system of the European currency, the euro, as in money. So Britain, like I said previously, is outside the ERM. It was outside since 1995. On the 1st November 1993, after the UK and the other 11 member states ratified, the EC became the EU under the Maastricht treaties. The compromise made between member states seeking deeper integration and those wishing to retain greater national control in the economic and political union. The Maastricht Treaty created the European Union as we know it today. That was in 1993. On the 1st of November, this treaty was ratified. And these were segment how Britain entered the European Union. Denmark, France, and the Republic of Ireland held referendums to ratify the Maastricht Treaty in accordance with Constitution of the United Kingdom, specifically that of parliamentary sovereignty. Ratification in the UK was not subject to approval by a referendum. Like I said previously, because of the doctrine of parliamentary sovereignty, referendum is not necessary in Britain because by law and constitution, Britain, British Parliament is sovereign and therefore it can act on behalf of the British people. So the 2016 referendum was a problem created willfully by the Conservative Party for political and not for any other reason. Political reason. It created a crisis for Britain and a crisis for the globe in Europe, and now it also created the current cost of living crisis. Despite this, British constitutional historian Vernon Bogdanor wrote that there was a clear constitutional rationale for requiring a referendum because although MPs are entrusted with legislative power by the electorate, they are not given authority to transfer that power. The UK's previous three referendums all concern this. I'm not clear what he's talking about, this professor of government, but like I said, we will all agree one way or the other that sovereignty mean Parliament can do whatever it likes. Further, as the ratification of the treaty was in the manifestos of the three major political parties, voters opposed to ratification are limited option for expressing this. For Bogdanor, while the ratification by the House of Commons might be legal, it would not be legitimate, which requires popular consent. The way in which the treaty was ratified, he judged, was likely to have fundamental consequences for both the British politics, for British politics, and for British relationship with the EU. So let us look at Euroscepticism in the United Kingdom. Euroscepticism, I explained earlier that people who do not like the European Union or not specifically not liking Britain being members of the European Union. So we look at this material, we look at prominent Eurosceptics like Margaret Thatcher and Nigel Farage and maybe David Cameron. David Cameron was maybe Eurosceptic, but in 2016 he campaigned to remain. So probably, well, he might be a Eurosceptic, but he might not. The Conservative Prime Ministers, Margaret Thatcher on the left and David Cameron right, use Eurosceptic rhetoric while supporting the UK's membership and development of the European single market. Rhetoric means things which actually means nothing in substance. Euroscepticism, and in particular, the impact of the UK Independence Party. Former leader Nigel Farage, pictured center here on this material, on the Conservatives' election results contributed to Cameron's 2015-16 attempts to renegotiate the UK's EU membership and ultimately holding the 2016 referendum. So the UKIP, as we know them, UKIP is a political party for refusing to actually reject totally, provides total rejection of the European Union, especially EU membership, without any compromise. UKIP as a political party is totally uncompromising about the European Union. Thatcher, who had previously supported the Common Market and the Single European Act, in the Burgess speech of 1988, warned against a European superstate exercising a new dominance from Brussels. And this is what we now have in Europe. There is a making now of a European superstate, as Margaret Thatcher claimed. It was not. It was actually, she was accurate in that sense, because the European Union, if you are someone who is passionate about your country, you're a nationalist, you believe in sovereignty, then you should reject the European Union. But that is the agenda. The agenda is actually to promote globalization, and European Union is a feature. Actually, we look at the European Union, but the European Union is actually an instrument of globalization. The reason there is European Union, because we as members of the global worlds are intending to become one world, one country. So Europe has been assigned the duty of creating globalization as a project. So in as much as we try to blame Europe, and especially the British people blaming Europe for taking away their sovereignty, is doing the right thing in terms of the global project and the global agenda. Because globalization means the removing away of sovereignty in favor of nationalism, internationalism. Because to become global, you need to create another sovereignty, which is a global, other than a national sovereignty. So the idea of sovereignty changes from national to global. There will be sovereignty. What we now have is national sovereignty, such as what Eurosceptics, those who do not want Europe, advocates for. They want national sovereignty. But globalists, people who want globalization, are advocating for global sovereignty. Sovereignty means it is a country. It actually underlines, it defines a country. You are not a country without sovereignty. So we are giving up our national sovereignty in favor of global sovereignty. We are saying, in effect, that we are supporting the European Union. The European Union, although opening in Europe, is actually driving the globe. It's driving the globe. Is actually at the center of creating globalization, the global economic and the political system. Which means with globalization, we are going to have a new country known as the globe. Ireland, it goes beyond the continents. Now we have reached a stage where we are actually instructing continents to come together to form the global country, a global world without borders. We're creating global villages. I explained this within the video program here, trying to explain what globalization means. So the European Union, Brexit, is the same thing, but underneath all this is capitalism. And capitalism, like I argued, is prone to crisis. It's unstable. That's why the government intervened to stabilize it. So when the cost of living occurred, whatever it is caused, the British government should have intervened. The global government should have intervened to stabilize the market. They would have prevented the cost of living in that way to becoming a crisis, which it is now. And that's why I'm trying to explain, linking every factors coming together to create the cost of living. The cost of living is not an accident. It's a deliberate. It's by design. It is actually the state choosing one thing over another. It chose the market over the people of the world. Because the market, to the government, the market is more important because it manages the economy. Whether it is actually right or wrong, that is actually the thinking. So, she influenced Daniel Annan. This is Margaret Thatcher. She influenced Daniel Annan, who in 1990 founded the Oxford Campaign for Independent Britain. Independence still relates to sovereignty. If you are sovereign, you are independent as a country. So European Union project, the European Union project takes away independence. So a country like Britain regain its independence from Europe by effecting Brexit. And it's the same across the globe, within Africa, within parts of the world. But I say the independence of Europe, of Britain from Europe is fake. Britain can no longer be independent. Countries of the world can no longer be independent because of globalization. Globalization means member countries of the globe loses its independence and become interdependent on one another at a global scale. In other words, they become dependent on the global government, which is something we are in the process of creating. First in Europe, being the melting pot of globalization, we are creating this, and then we are creating pockets in Africa, Asia, America, and then we are going to create the global world. Whether it is good or bad is another story. And so, with hindsight, some see this as the start of the campaign for Brexit. As we see it today, actually the seed, some people see that the seed was sown by Margaret Thatcher, former Prime Minister, in 1990, when, they began to deal with, the government began to deal with think tanks, with academics, with experts to push the argument in what now we see featuring as Brexit. Although I have to say Brexit could not have occurred at all were it not for the mistake made by the Conservative government. So this was actually the writing by the Financial Times, which actually reported on that matter. The vote to approve the Maastricht Treaty in 1993 triggered a strong Eurosceptic interest, splitting the Conservative Party and leading to many past supporters forming alternative Eurosceptic parties. So, the European Union, in that respect, had always been a political Achilles heel to the Conservative Party in particular, especially from the time when Margaret Thatcher, when things radically changed with the right-wing conservatism promoting what is now called Euroscepticism. This included Sir James Goldsmith forming the Referendum Party in 1994 to contest the 1997 general election on a platform of providing a referendum on the nature of the UK relationship with the rest of the European Union. That is actually political hot air. And in substance, Britain is in Europe, and no country is expected in substance to leave the European Union anyway, because the European Union is already a matured project anyway. And the party fielded candidates in 547 constituencies at that election and won 810,860 votes, 2.6% of the total votes cast, but failed to win a parliamentary seat because the vote was spread across the country. The Referendum Party disbanded after Goldsmith's death in 1997. The UK Independence Party, UKIP, a Eurosceptic party, political party, was formed in response to Maastricht Treaty in response to Maastricht in 1993. In 1997, Nigel Farage, who actually leads the independent UKIP, independent party, UK Independent Party, is led by a man called Nigel Farage. He took over the leadership of the party as a right of centre populist movement in England. Prior to 2023, the issue of EU membership never scored higher than 5% on surveys of voters' priorities, polling just 6% in 2013 and 11% in 2014. So it was a non-electoral issue at all during this period up to 2014. However, an increasing proportion of voters viewed immigration and asylum as of key importance. Like I said before, every time there is a political, economic crisis, the British people blame foreigners for their problem by adopting a hardline anti-immigration platform and conflating the issue with EU membership. UK was able to achieve electoral success, reaching third place in the UK during the 2004 European elections, second place in the 2009 European election, and first place in the 2014 European election with 27.5% of the total vote. Like I said, the Conservative, including the UK party, use immigration problem and actually link it with the European Union and deceive the British people that they were the same, the European involving foreigners, immigration involving foreigners who are actually coming into Britain to take away their wealth, and that to them they choose to explain that in terms of every time there's an economic problem, the Conservative Party goes for immigration, it goes for Europe as a political tool to win votes in Britain. That's what happened. That's what happened with Brexit. This was the first time since the 1910 general election that any party other than the Labour Party or the Conservatives had taken the largest share of the vote in a national election. These electoral success and internal pressure, including from many of the remaining Maastricht rebels within the ruling Conservative Party, put pressure on leader and Prime Minister David Cameron as potential voter defections. Defection to UK threatened defeat in the 2015 United Kingdom general election. The Conservative Party was afraid of UKIP insurgents, and UKIP insurgents was created by lying to the British people about Brexit and immigration as being the cause of economic difficulties. But in fact, as a matter of fact, that is a political dishonesty by the Conservative Party and other extremist political opportunists. They know the lie, but they still use it to win votes. They deceive the British people. The British people also allow them to be deceived by their governments. And this is actually a problem with politics in the UK and across the globe. There is a lot of dishonesty, with politicians. This threat was emphasized by UKIP winning 2 by-elections in Clacton and Rochester and Stroud, triggering a defection by Conservative MPs in 2014. So look at opinion poll in 1977 to 1975. Opinion poll for the United Kingdom on the European Union membership and of the referendum thereat. Both pro and anti-EU views had majority support at different times from 1977 to 1975. The EC membership referendum of 1975, 2/3 of British voters favored continued EC membership. Over the decades of the European Union, UK-EU membership, Euroscepticism existed on both the left and the right of the British politics. According to a statistical analysis published in April 2016 by Professor John Curtis of Strathclyde University, surveys showed an increase in Euroscepticism, broadly defined as a wish to leave the European Union or stay in the European Union and try to reduce the European Union's powers from 38% in 1993 to 65% in 2015. The BSA survey for the period of July to November 2015 showed that 60% backed the option to continue as a member, and 30% backed withdrawal. These are already some statistics resulting from some survey. So let us look at referendum of 2016. Let us look at the United Kingdom and the European Union membership referendum. Let us look also at the negotiations for membership reform, 2015, 2016, United Kingdom renegotiation of European Union membership. In 2012, Prime Minister David Cameron initially rejected calls for a referendum on the UK's EU membership, but then suggested the possibility of a future referendum to endorse his proposed renegotiation of Britain's relationship with the rest of the EU. So the logic of referendum was anchored on a possible policy by the Conservative to renegotiate the relationship between the European Union and Britain. So in a sense, there would have been a necessity to do a referendum, but I would argue that Britain could simply negotiate within the powers vested in the government through Parliament, in particular parliamentary sovereignty of the British infrastructure. According to the BBC, the Prime Minister acknowledged the need to ensure the UK's renegotiated position within the EU had the full-hearted support of the British people, but they needed to show tactical and strategic patience. On the 23rd January 2023, under pressure from many of his MPs and from the rise of UKIP, Cameron promised in his Bloomberg speech that a Conservative government would hold an in or out referendum on EU membership before the end of 2017 on a renegotiated package if elected on the 7th May 2015 general election. So the content of this negotiation is probably involving something to do with money and border movement known as the Custom Union. This was included in the Conservative Party manifesto for election. So the Conservative Party won the election with a majority. Soon afterwards, the European Union Referendum Act 2015 was introduced into Parliament to enable the referendum. Cameron favoured remaining in the reformed EU and sought to renegotiate on 4 key points: protection of the single market for non-Eurozone countries, reduction of red tape exempting Britain from ever closer union, and restricting immigration from the rest of the European Union. And these are political rhetoric, has to do with immigration, has to do with actually Britain not getting too close or too deep into the European economic system, political and economic system, and bureaucracy. They were arguing in terms of free market economy. They were actually accusing the European Union of actually preventing free market economy because they are right-wing politicians. So they this is actually their values, free market economy, and they thought that was actually inconsistent. I mean, that was actually being prevented by the European Union, according to them. And all the other issues to do with control the single market, to protect them from non-eurozone countries. So arguing, eurozone should be more for membership other than other people who are actually outside the eurozone. So all these are conservative behavior, which is extremely on the right wing. So they started developing this political posturing and arguments. And in December 2015, opinion polls showed a clear majority in favor of remaining in the EU. They also showed support would drop if Cameroon did not negotiate adequate safeguards for non-Eurozone member states and restrictions on benefits for non-UK EU citizens. So you talk about public policy issues, which was actually of concern to the Conservative Party in relation to the European Union. The outcome of the negotiation was revealed in February 2016. Some limits to in-work benefits for new EU migrants were agreed, but before they could be applied, a member state such as the UK would have to get permission from the European Commission and then from the European Council, which is composed of the heads of government of every member state. So the UK was given what it wanted, but there was a caveat. It still needed to get permission from the European Union government in terms of some elements of public and social policy issues, like benefit and things like that. In a speech to the House of Commons on the 22nd February 2016, Cameron announced a referendum date of 26 June 2016 and commented on the referendum on the renegotiation settlement. He spoke of an intention to trigger the Article 50 process immediately following a leave vote, and of the 2-year time period to negotiate the arrangements for exit. So they were actually flirting with the idea of leaving the European Union at that time. So after the original wording for the referendum question was challenged, the government agreed to change the official referendum question to should the United Kingdom remain a member of the European Union or leave the European Union. Thank you for watching this video. This is the second part of looking at the European Union as a factor of the cost of living crisis. And I hope you enjoyed the video. Leave a comment below and click a notification bell for more videos and subscribe to support this channel. Thank you. Bye-bye.